Hey, this is GatorEX and welcome to the next episode of GatorEX Podcast. This one's going to be a solo one because we've actually had quite a busy summer and Bait was, away for a while. I almost called him Rex. I'm Rex. That's right. The next one, we're going to be back together and we're going to be hanging out, talking, chatting, and we're going to probably, definitely do a lot more. But as we're catching up, I figured I'd go ahead and do just a little solo one here because, and actually, I'm cooking up another one. I'm in my head. I might even do another one. But the point is, I've been wanting to talk about the Pokemon trading card game, as if I hadn't already brought it up here and there on the main channel. As you can tell, I am a trading card game guy, from the videos, how I'll typically mention something about the trading card game if it's relevant, obviously, especially if it's relevant to the topic that I'm discussing. And then obviously, I've been trying to mix in a few more TCG streams here and there. I had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles Regionals earlier this year, and this is something I also apologize for that I didn't get out any kind of a dedicated sort of video. At some point I really do kind of want to make some main channel video overall, with a script and everything, discussing the trading card game and kind of more so something like, hey, this is why you should play it. This is why I really love it. This is why I think that every Pokemon fan should at least try it out or check it out if they haven't already. So at the Los Angeles Regionals, I was just a spectator. I wasn't actually participating. Obviously there was the main tournament and not just the trading card game, but the video game as well and Pokemon Go. Those are, the three main pillars that there are. I don't think there was Pokemon Unite. I'm going to look stupid if there was, but obviously there are the main things that they have there. But I really feel like if you're into the trading card game, you'll have probably a much better experience as a spectator. For one thing, there were main events, but there were also a few vendors here and there, some tables set up selling cards, collectibles. A good amount of them had stuff actually from Japan, and I'll kind of discuss maybe some of the stuff that I got at the end. But the other thing is that this one, there were side events, and I know typically there are side events at, a bunch of others, and, I don't know necessarily how well they're run because I definitely do need to go to some of them, but honestly, for the side events, you could definitely just legitimately spend the whole weekend there. I was only there for Friday and Saturday. I didn't really know what exactly to expect. I'm like, well, I want to go as a spectator. Hopefully I'll have some fun there. I'll bring a deck and I'll bring some money, of course, obviously. And it was a great time. So the way that the system worked for the side events is that you buy basically these little, these little tokens, and that's what you exchange for each side event. And, there's a list, all the side events, and there were actually, video game side events too. Battles, they had Ogre Oustin as well for Scarlet and Violet, which, I honestly really want to try and get more into that. But most of the side events were trading card game stuff. They were at varying levels. And most everything was kind of like in pods of 4 here and there. And like I said, depending on how many tokens are. And winning side events get you dice. And the dice are, little special dice made specifically for the event. And then you can either keep them as a collectible thing, or you can exchange those dice for prizes at the prize booth. So, it's kind of an interesting way of doing things. Obviously, you do have to spend money in order to, enjoy it. But most of the stuff that you're there, you're getting packs of cards for participation for most of these, or it's actually part of it. One of the things I participated in was a draft battle. And again, this you're doing it in pods of 4, and you're receiving the little build and battle boxes. For those of you who don't know, the little boxes that Pokemon sells, they come with 4 packs of a set, and they come with a randomized half deck that will have 2 halves kind of randomized. And that's the thing. You get a little randomized deck, and then you get 4 packs of cards to open those up and then add to that deck, and that's what you play with. And that was fun. And I did pretty well in that, I didn't win that one, but I did pretty well in it, and still got some packs at the end of it. But I think that one was, really fun. And the thing is that I think that one cost 4 tokens. Oh, and by the way, the tokens cost $6 each. So for the most part, you're spending what you would on the build and battle box itself, and you're, there for a good time, potentially participating for some dice to win at the end of it. And of course you get, whatever additional participation packs there were. There was single pack battle where everybody gets 1 pack and that is your deck. Literally everything from the pack is your deck, plus 10 energies. So that one was really, really funny. There are some where you use your actual deck. There's one where you battle against a judge, someone who, is associated with the Pokemon company, actually as a judge at the event. So some of them are there at the side events as well, and you can battle against them, and they all have different rules. And that was, really fun too. The one that I played against is that, his special rule was that you play with your deck face up, and you play with your hand revealed. So there's basically, perfect knowledge of what your opponent has in their hand, what you could have on top of the deck. And the thing is that specifically with me, it just ended up being a really good matchup for me because I was playing a Lost Zone box, and that works really well in that sense. And I was specifically playing Lost Zone with Bayonet. And, people who know, So just kind of to explain it, Bayonet has an ability that reveals your opponent's hand anyway, and it does more damage based on how many trainer cards are in your opponent's hand. We're playing with these special rules where I can see my opponent's hand, then I'll know exactly how much damage this Bayonet is going to hit for, and so then, it's a good extra disruption. So, it was a fun time doing all this and that, and I think, a big thing too for this is that it was a really social kind of event. And this is something that I would say for the trading card game as well, just in general, is that, whenever I go to anything for Pokemon where it's like we're playing the trading card game, whether it be locals or anything of the sort, or again, even this, I feel like I really end up just making friends with everybody I talk to, sit next to. There are, some people who would typically prefer to keep themselves and they're pretty quiet, and you can tell that's just kind of their personality, but for the most part, everybody is there for fun and they want to have fun. Talk to a bunch of different people, people who came, still from within the state, but a few hours away, because they don't typically have these all that much. For me, it was literally like a 20-minute drive, and on top of that too, I got someone to drop me off too, so that I can just hang out and walk around the whole time there. But I think it's great too is that like Pokemon is like super cutesy friendly and this and that, and like the card game too, yes, there is actual strategy, and I know that things can potentially get toxic in certain environments or certain players, people, this and that. We see that with basically everything, but comparatively, right, coming from a Yu-Gi-Oh background, I would get this feeling with Yu-Gi-Oh sometimes, but certain settings we would kind of have that camaraderie. We would have that like, hey, oh, what are you up to? Hey, where you're from, or what do you and have that like fun, goofy environment, specifically with this one really small shop that we used to play at that wasn't even like an official tournament store, so you weren't getting like official points or prizes. But when I go to official kind of events for Yu-Gi-Oh! Or official kind of tournaments, I don't necessarily get that. Yeah, there's a bit of that friendliness, but I didn't feel it the same way that I do with Pokemon whenever I go to anything. And I think for LA Regionals, I felt that the most, like that I've felt it ever. So yeah, I did go there by myself because my friends weren't like into Pokemon. Bait does actually have a deck now, and where I'm going to probably teach him a bit more, and I think he knows kind of vaguely how to play. He wants to get into it and try it out here and there, especially too because one of his favorite Pokemon is actually a pretty decent playable deck right now, but I'll let him talk about that when he's all good and ready and available for a podcast. But I decided to go by myself for this, and it was still a good time. I still met a good amount of new people, a few people recognizing me, and I had a bunch of Totodile cards to give out, so that was pretty neat. The really funny interaction was while I was sitting down during my judge battle, and actually I was just giving away Totodile cards to everybody I interact with, because like I said, by the end of the game, I'm basically friends with them, or I didn't get everybody's social media to like super keep in contact with. You form that relationship throughout the course of the game, and as you're talking, as you're setting up, you're talking, and then afterwards. And so yeah, after I played against anybody, I was like, hey, do you want a Totodile card? And but the funny thing was that while I was playing against the judge, afterwards I asked him, he's like, hey, would you like a Totodile card? I've been giving these out to everybody. And then the guy next to me says, oh, hey, hey, oh yeah, I recognize you. Hey, could I have one? So that was a fun experience. So yeah, I think it was just really a great time in that, yeah, you really can just go there by yourself and still have a great fun time. And, obviously I still had that thing of, I didn't get like super recognized, and I obviously didn't have, the red carpet rolled out for me or anything. I was just a regular attendee. Still, I think just any kind of regular person, especially if you go in with the right attitude or the right kind of personality, kind of the friendly vibes basically, then yeah, I definitely think that you can have this kind of a great interaction. And again, this more so for like people who are just not into it. It's pretty similar for a lot of other Pokemon things, because, for the most part, I don't really do a lot of like Pokemon like events. I really just want to get a lot more into them. I know they have stuff for like Pokemon Go, public events for that, video game tournaments, and this one of course was TCG plus video games, so it was kind of more or less like the same thing altogether. But aside from that, the venue was pretty good. Unfortunately though, I heard that the internet went out during the event, and it just really caused some problems for a lot of people, actually the video game people, because with this you actually do need to connect to the internet for that. Meanwhile, the trading card game stuff was pretty fine for the most part, I suppose, when it comes to actually playing your games and actually signing the match slip afterwards. But obviously as a spectator, I had a great time. I had no real issue because everything was just handled offline and physically in paper, at least for me and all the trading card game stuff. So, I can't necessarily speak to the actual competing aspect, the competitive aspect to it, because from what I hear, it wasn't off to the best start for, once they actually got things going. And the venue also worked out pretty well. We were in the entertainment hall of the Los Angeles Convention Center, so, anyone who happens to have been there, this is where Anime Expo is every year, and, my friends and I all used to go to Anime Expo. However, we've kind of just been off of it for the past few years because it just gets way too crowded, and there's a lot there. It's really fun because literally everything goes there, because Anime Expo is just probably one of the biggest anime conventions just there is. So there's a lot of stuff to do and a lot of official big stuff there. But when I've been there for say the Digimon events that I've gone to over the past last year, and there was one this year actually, that's really fun, especially in my kind of journey and getting into Digimon over the past year. And then also this event too, with all of those being smaller, I feel like the lines are a lot better. Actually, for the Bandai one, the line was kind of interesting and, really long, but that went moving. And the point is that, with Pokemon, this one here, there was a long line outside at the very beginning, but basically once the doors opened, I forget what time it was supposed to start exactly, but basically the time they said that, we're letting everybody in, it was smooth sailing from there. The line was moving. It was still a line for a good portion, but I probably wasn't in line for longer than 20 minutes by the time I actually got to the very front and said, this is my name, I already got my badge, yada yada, and I got my badge. And then at that point, you can walk in and see everything there. So it was run really well in that aspect, and that for just being in line, you're able to get in pretty quickly and pretty well. There weren't a whole lot of vendors. Let me think. There were definitely less than 10 vendors, and these are all obviously local little businesses that set up and that are selling stuff, but it's always good to have these here. There were some cool things, especially just all of the Japanese exclusive merch, because for whatever reason, there's a lot of Pokemon stuff that's in Japan that just does not make its way to Pokemon centers over here, but that was still pretty neat. I would say some of the most interesting stuff there are the special sleeves that they have, because, they have card sleeves with some of the cool characters on it here and there. There were Arezu card sleeves, which I definitely could just not say no to, so I got those for myself. There are playmats too, those things that just don't make it to the US. There were little character plushies too, which I really considered getting one, but I'm I just know this is going to get messed up or this and that. And on top of that too, I had a little Squirtle plush cling or plush keychain on my backpack anyway the whole time. And then of course there were other cards there. I didn't really buy too many singles. I mean, maybe a few here and there, but I didn't get anything super worth discussing or mentioning. I did actually just pick up some for alligators because I wanted to, after this event, really finish my for alligator deck physically, because I was just really reinvigorated about the trading card game as a whole, and so I decided to do that. And then over at the prize wall, I actually just got a Palkia pre-constructed deck, because you need the Palkias for the alligator deck, and I didn't really have any of those with me, so I just went and did that, and that I think was a decent choice. And actually also it actually helped because there were a bunch of other staples in there that I got, and I'm probably rambling a bit, but for the most part that's just kind of what I walked away with at the end of the day, as with my prize dice, basically just that deck and a few packs of Paradox Rift, but don't worry, there was really nothing inside them. But after this event, I'm just really reinvigorated for Pokemon and, actually attending actual events. And, I'll go to sneak peeks, or no, what are they called in Pokemon? They're called pre-release events. That's it. I'll go to pre-release events here and there when I remember to, or whenever I get the chance. And I'll go to the locals at a card game store again, just one of those things when I get a chance. But this experience here, just being at a huge space where there's a lot of Pokemon fans, was great. And that's the thing too, is there's a lot of space to walk around also, and there are just a lot of just open tables. There's a neat little thing too, I guess there's a parent tournament as well for parents who show up and want to learn. There is a great area at the very beginning to teach you exactly how to play the trading card game, if you know basically nothing. And I think at the end of it you probably walk away with just a little mini collection of cards that are there, so I think that's neat. And for the most part they did a great job of just having something for everybody and anybody. On day 2, a good amount of people probably end up just dropping, because if they lose enough rounds, then they know they're not going to qualify for the day 2, so they end up just filling out the side events and doing all that, because those are also fun. And that's a fun way to get extra dice, and you walk away with some extra little prize, or just have something fun to do, because you show up to actually play the game and have fun. And if you're losing in the main event or not doing too well in the main event, then I guess that makes sense to go ahead and go to the side events and do that. By the way, I was there for the day 0 and then day 1. I was not there for day 2. Day 0 is that Friday where you just kind of show up and you get in there, and you can still do some of the side events because those are actually open up, and then you can, again, grab some of those dice, take them home, keep them for the next day to kind of build up your collection of whatever you want to exchange for actual prizes, or if you want to end up keeping them. Though I realize that that's sort of everything I can say about it, because, there's not all that much more to say about it, because, I did spend my whole day there and I was actually playing the game, but unless I recorded my games, and I can break down turn by turn exactly what happened, and especially too if everybody listening is super into the trading card game, it would just can't necessarily do that. But yeah, I think it's really fun. It's been a while too since I've really been getting into the card game, or it's been a while since I've like gone and done something like this, because I mentioned for the card game, or in other videos I mentioned that I kind of like jump in and out of it. But I think that I'm a lot more solidified in it now over these last, over this last year, probably over these last 2 years, give or take. Honestly, ever since the Lost Box has been a thing, because that's just the deck that I've been playing. One of my first experiences, and hey, let's talk about that. One of my first experiences was at a Pokemon League, just locally, because this was when I was younger, and my brothers obviously were younger, and we were all kind of into the Pokemon trading card game, and we were actual kids at this point in time, but we knew about Pokemon Leagues, or actually I ended up looking into them, and there's a feature on the Pokemon website where you can look these up, where you can see where there's a league, and at this point in time, the closest one, or at least like the main one, was not necessarily in a game store, because not a lot of game stores had made their way here where we are, at least had opened up and had been officialized and were actually hosting Pokemon events. So the Pokemon League that we went to for a good amount of time during one summer was actually just inside a McDonald's. Yeah, it wasn't in a game store, wasn't in a comic book store or anything. They legitimately met inside a McDonald's on Thursday nights. But I tell you, boy, was it fun, because this was a good way for us to actually learn a little more about the card game and learn a little more about playing it, have an opportunity to trade with each other. I think this is the time they were doing badges, although we didn't go enough. Like, we didn't go too often to get like many of the badges. I think this was like kind of at the end of it, but just having like a way to meet other Pokemon fans and hang out with them, that it was really fun. I remember, this is where we were not necessarily like really getting good at deck building, but again, because we're kids at this point, but we're getting a little bit of a better understanding. And so that's kind of like that sort of super, that innocence, that the fact that we were novices, I think was a big part in the fun that we were able to have in it. And the fact that it was also at a McDonald's was pretty cool, because then you could just grab some McDonald's fries as well, or get some dessert or some other little food there and just hang out as well. And I realized that a lot of my first experiences too in, like little tournaments or leagues, whether it be for Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, were in spaces that were not official. Well, okay, the Pokemon League was actually official because, we found it through the Pokemon website, but the fact that it was in a McDonald's rather than actually at a game store, it added that kind of like, that unrefined kind of feeling, or that kind of like ragtag group looking back at it. And again, with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments that I would go to, that was at some old guy's comic book store that wasn't officially connected with Konami, or you don't have it in your mind to like build up points or actually compete, or just really, really low, I'm gonna get really, really good, and I'm gonna try and get my invite to this and that. You're really just there to have fun, and like that's what I do now still. I don't want to actually try to qualify for like any sort of big events. I just want to go there and have fun. That's why I was in the side events at the regionals. But what I'm saying is that looking back at my childhood, it was just really funny how unorganized a lot of it felt comparatively to what I'm able to experience nowadays. So I hope that was interesting and fun to hear about some of my experience with a Pokemon trading card game, just enjoying it casually and having fun with it. I don't necessarily want to say like, I want everybody who views or watches any of my stuff to really get into the trading card game, but like, trust me, I have a few ideas for some main channel videos that are just kind of like, no, I really recommend it. It's like a fun thing. Although that's kind of like the neat thing about Pokemon as a whole, is that there's something for everybody, is that, you can play the video games. And even then, when you play the video games, there are a bunch of different ways you can play them, whether you just do like vanilla playthroughs, Nuzlocke, or you want to shiny hunt, or actually play competitively. And then we have a card game, which is there for collecting or, actually playing it. And again, on top of that too, the playing it fits into like the casually or the competitively. Like it's just so cool how much there is to Pokemon as a whole. Like the franchise overall is that you can enjoy like one thing and maybe not necessarily get super into the other thing, but it's just like, hey, I'm really into Pokemon Unite, but maybe you don't necessarily have like a lot of knowledge about competitive in the main series games, or you're very far away from the trading card game. But that's still a cool thing, is that everyone can just kind of unite under one banner of Pokemon. So I think that's cool and fun. But the thing is about the trading card game is that it's potentially a little more of a financial investment if you want to play it physically. It's not really all that expensive. Decks are like super cheap. In fact, a lot of the products they're starting to sell now are just like legitimately, hey, here's this competitive deck. Well, maybe like a few sets old, but it's basically just the entire deck. Here it is. Walk into Target, buy it for $30. And it's just crazy that that's a thing. And overall, if you do want to just buy singles of some of the top performing decks, they are just pretty inexpensive overall. You will have to get a different deck in a bit, or some of it will rotate out, but a good amount of that core deck is going to be able to carry over into the next format, or into basically any other deck that you want to play. So there's all that. as opposed to the main series games, which obviously everything spawns off of the video games, and those are like a one-time fee of $60, although nowadays, right, nowadays they're $60 rather than the $35 or $40 that they used to be, and then now also, hey, you gotta add in the $30 DLC, so $90, but let's call that like $60 one year and then $30 the next year, but for the most part, it's like, that's a one and done, and then you can like definitely spend hundreds and hundreds of hours in that, or could even just stick to some of the older games. It really doesn't matter. It's all up to like what you want to do, but what I'm saying is that if you're at all curious of the trading card game, I highly recommend it. It's really fun. Or, even if you just want to go to like any sort of leagues or physical events or tournaments, like don't hesitate to go to any of those, because it's like a fun time, because you're going to be there all to play Pokemon, but you're all eventually going to meet anyway because you're all there. And with your shared interest, and hopefully, again, if you have the right personality, the right kind of vibes, you're going to interact with each other and probably gel really well. What's funny too is thinking about like backstories or origins, especially with Pokemon in that sense. All of my friends, we all met because we were into Pokemon at the time we were all in school together, and so we've actually just stayed friends all this time. And that does include Bait. I think, that we actually talked about this in like the first episode of the podcast, in that sense of like how we all kind of got into Pokemon, or at least, some of them got into Pokemon or was revived with it, and then we all hanging out together and playing Pokemon during lunch. But yeah, actually recently I have been thinking just a lot about like origins and inspirations, and not necessarily that I'm looking back and I'm feeling distraught or anything, but it's one of those things of like, man, things were really different back then, and not necessarily like, oh, nostalgia, things used to be better back then, but your worldview specifically of, what I'm going to be into, what I'm going to be doing later, and I'm specifically talking about YouTube. I've really been looking back at a lot of the channels that I used to watch personally, right, back then. It's just been kind of interesting, like, just doing a lot of reevaluating of what I'm doing specifically. I'm really happy where I am, though. I'm really happy with where my channel is and where it's potentially going in the future, and where I'm going to go from here. There's no end in sight, basically, even though it feels like I've been around for a long time, and it feels like, oh man, sometimes, you feel like, oh man, I've really been here for a while, but I think that specifically just this summer was a really, really good thing for me, specifically to just actually going to that Pokemon event, because I did sort of reignite my love for Pokemon in that sense. Sometimes there are like times where I think like, oh man, there's nothing really going on, especially now with Pokemon Legends ZA being basically so far off. I think this has actually been a good year for Pokemon fans to actually just kind of reevaluate where they are in their fandom, I guess, where they want to go from here. And I think it's totally a good thing. I think it's totally a good thing that there was no Pokemon game coming out this year, because we actually do get a break, not necessarily just like for development time, because, with Pokemon Legends ZA, you think about it though, they probably started development on that in 2022. Like right after Legends Arceus, and even then that leaves us 3 years or so, give or take, if it's coming out 2025, which is typically the same amount of dev time that basically every Pokemon game gets. So it's not necessarily that Legends ZA is having more time than other Pokemon games, but I think the fact that they're not putting out a game this year is good for, one thing, their brand, for the mental and emotional health of their fans, because while yearly Pokemon games sound like a fun idea, I don't think that that's something that can really sustainably be a thing forever. I think back to 2015 where we didn't get a Pokemon game. Yeah, it was 2015, because we got, let's say, Black and White, or at least, Black and White came out 2011 for us. Black 2 White 2 came out 2012 for us. And then on to 2013, that's when we went on to the worldwide releases. And then 2014, that was Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. 2015 was no game. I think we did get Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon, though I did not play that, but that's not a main series game. Not one of the core ones actually made by Game Freak. And then going on to 2016, then we're back to basically yearly releases, for the most part forever, until the DLC, because like DLC stuff is like kind of interesting of how exactly we quantify that. But for the most part, what I'm saying is that nearly 9 years later, we have yet another opportunity to just stop and think about, okay, where are we right now as a fandom, as a fandom as a whole, or as like fans individually? Do I still really, really like the franchise? Am I still really, really into it? When there's no main series game to look forward to immediately, you really either get into some of the spin-off games or some of the alternate formats or stuff. I would actually call the trading card game a spin-off game, like the physical trading card game. I'd call it a spin-off game because it is technically a game that is inspired by the video games. Not another video game, but it's still a game. It's a card game. getting that opportunity to kind of explore something else for Pokemon, I think is a great idea to actually just be able to do that. And I think that's really what I've been doing this year, getting a lot more into the card game in that sense. But also, just also revisiting a bunch of the other spin-off games, because especially, if you watch the live streams on the main channel, this summer we've done Detective Pikachu. We're still kind of off and on with that. I've been playing the trading card game off and on here and there, but I completed Pokemon Ranger, the first one, and now I'm on to Mystery Dungeon, or I'm about to start Mystery Dungeon, Explores the Sky, and then there's that one, and obviously there are a bunch of other spin-off games, and I did that last year, but I think, it's just a great time to really explore something else, because not everybody has played every spin-off game. I know there are some people who have, and I know that there are some people who have played like a good amount of them, but I think that that's something that I really want to eventually do. Eventually, I want to have played every Pokemon spin-off game. It's kind of funny to think of that too, is like when you're a kid, maybe you try out some of these, maybe you try out some of the other Pokemon spin-off games, but like there are just a bunch that you don't. For me, you get your main series Pokemon game, and those ones like I would always play, and I would always want to like, all right, I'm gonna pre-order this, I'm gonna get it the day it comes out, I know exactly when it comes out, that's gonna be great. But I never really got into a bunch of the others. Let me think. Okay, Pokemon Pinball, Ruby Sapphire, that one I played, that was great. The Mystery Dungeon, the first one I played when I was younger, but Pokemon Ranger I never really got into. Pokemon Conquest I didn't play until recently. And even then, the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games are a bunch of those that I just never got into. All the 3DS ones I've never played, and I'm just now getting to the DS ones. And what is there? Pokemon Troze, Pokemon Dash? I never played those. Those are like the DS ones. I think there's a lot of time, and especially too when you get older, it feels like there's a little less time for video games, or a little less time to like sit down and try this out or play this thing. So hypothetically, I think that, let's say like, okay, Pokemon Legends ZA comes out and that's the last Pokemon game ever. Pokemon stops in 2025. I think there's still a lot more to keep enjoying, because, okay, you go back and you play a bunch of the spin-off games. You, I don't know, maybe try out the trading card game. You revive some other alternate formats. Just the fact that Nuzlockes and challenges, and heck, even ROM hacks as well, are keeping the game alive, or keeping like older games still interesting, or people are playing those. I think that, if Pokemon ended next year, the fandom would be just fine. Everyone would keep going. And I'm kind of comparing this to a year where there's no main series game. I mean, obviously, there's still stuff happening, especially now that we're in an era of gaming being a little bit more of a live servicey. And I know that's a pretty negative thing to hear or to say, but for the most part, that's the case. Pokemon Go is more of a live, I actually, is that exactly the term, live service? The point is that, there are different events, different updates for like Pokemon Go, Pokemon Unite, all the free-to-play stuff. And then even for Scarlet and Violet, they'll have different raids and different like outbreak events here and there that kind of keep the game going and keep it fresh. And that's the upside of there being internet updates for video games. And so it's a little less, there's a little less of a wait between things. When there's no main series game going on, like Pokemon doesn't just stop completely and disappear. Literally every day there's Pokemon news or something about it. But also, this has been a good time to reflect on YouTube, or me specifically, or just in my creative endeavors. And I don't want to like go on and say, oh, this is gonna be on my own, my venting session. But perhaps I need that sometimes. Again, there's like one topic specifically I want to wait to discuss about with Bait. But it's just really interesting. Again, like I said, looking back on all the channels that I used to watch, the ones that got me inspired to start creating content, it's really interesting. And I'm really just kind of running into something here. And like, okay, I'm not full-time YouTube. I'm like most of the time YouTube, but I still have other stuff that I got to do. But I'm running into the thing of realizing like, oh, I really need coworkers, or I really need someone to talk to in this sense. And, there are a bunch of creators and a bunch of people that I know that I can definitely like go to and talk to. But I'm really kind of almost missing like having some kind of physical place to go to and actually just be there and sit down and like have coworkers. And it'd be cool if I could go somewhere and there were other people to sit down with and talk to and create videos with basically all day. There are some people that I know who are getting into content creation or just kind of stuff like that, and I haven't necessarily said all that much to them, but I really do kind of want to talk to them. And that's like one thing about Bait, is that I kind of just put it out there and I just said something like, or publicly I said something like, man, it'd be great if I literally just had like a YouTube friend, and then he just kind of said, hey, he volunteered himself. So that's kind of why he's more of a lot more of a core member here. And, I know he's not here for this one specifically because I feel like I needed just one where I could just talk by myself for a bit. But I'm very glad to have him. Although sometimes I feel a little bad in the sense that I'd still obviously compensate him a bit whenever he takes time out of his day to come by and to record something. And then on top of that too, I get him some food afterwards. We eat together. But he's very comfortable where he is, and he doesn't necessarily want to start any kind of career in YouTube or content creation. Just having some other people who have this as a hobby, I really want to just chat with some of them. I want to sit down and talk to some of my friends who are working on some of their own things, and I kind of want to say hey, do you really, really want to do this? Let's not necessarily go all in together, and I don't want to say let's create a new channel, let's make the next Rooster Teeth together or whatever, but I just think that having somebody or having some other kind of frequent collaborators or just somebody who knows a little more, maybe not what I'm going through, but more so of hey, a bit about creating stuff, and also on top of that, maybe if this is your not your full-time thing, but if you do, it takes up a good amount of your day, then I think that's good also, because sometimes it's good to just vent to somebody about this, just talk about it, not necessarily to talk you out of stuff, but just to say hey, here's this thing I'm thinking of, at least just listen and tell me if it's a good idea, or tell me what you think of it so far. And I think that that's something that I'm really missing. For a while it was really cool and really exciting. It was great that I don't need to really talk to anybody. I don't really need to hang out with anybody, or, this whole channel is just me. It's my own thing. This is what I do. I just need to rely on myself. I really am now kind of seeing much more the value in oh, cool, I did need people all along. So yeah, at the moment, there's really no foreseeable changes. I'm still going to be doing what I'm doing, but I think that it's really just more of a personal thing. So I think I would say that if by chance anyone is thinking of, oh, let me start making YouTube videos, or, oh, let me really get into this. It's yeah, it's a great fun hobby. And then if it really evolves into something like it has for me, going off topic, but I think specifically there's a Bible verse that says something along the lines of, don't forsake the gathering of brothers, effectively saying don't look at getting together with other people who are kind of in the same boat as you, or other people who believe something similar to you. And, let's relate this to YouTube, other people who have the same kind of creative values of you. Don't neglect, actually just interact with them, talking with them, sharing whatever you're going through or whatever you're thinking about. And, like I said, I am connected with a few other content creators. I need to personally take that step to talk with them a bit more, but I think that there's there's a little more value in there being people who you can physically interact with. Because again, all the YouTube content creators I know who are, all just great people, and I love interacting with them anytime I get, through call, but none of them live here in California. None of them are a few minutes away in the same way that a lot of my friends are, or none of them have known me for years and have been super personal in the same way that some of my other friends who are working on their own streams, or thinking about getting into content creation on YouTube the same way that they are. So I think that's also going to be one of my personal goals, to, kind of encourage them and to really, really just go out to them and say, hey, can I really, really help you get this started? Can I encourage you to do this? And, maybe that's a bit selfish to have that motive to be oh, you should really start this. And then also we can talk with each other. We can chat with each other. For one thing, I'm not necessarily going to gain followers from them, growing their channel, especially if they're starting from zero, but more so in the sense that I already have that emotional connection, but I would get more of that that kind of interaction. I guess I feel like I'm missing, but I think it'd be good for them as well if that's something that they really want to do. Oh boy. But I guess, that's some next steps that I want to be doing. I don't want to say that I'm a selfish person, because I am someone who's very much oh, let me help you, or hey, do you need any help, or are you good with that? What can I do for you? But I feel creatively, with YouTube and stuff, that I have been a little more, not necessarily bad selfish with, but I just really like how it's something that I can do myself, and that I can really get something back out of it by myself. I tend not to pour into other people in that creative sense, if that makes, if you get what I'm saying, in that I'm a lot more of a physical kind of helper, in that hey, let me carry this thing for you. Hey, is there anything I can do for you? Can I go here? Can I go that? Can I get this thing for you? Can I, help you set whatever thing up? In that that I'm very much so raised that very selflessly, but more so in my creative endeavors, I feel that I'm not necessarily not that I have something that other people don't, but it's I could potentially help someone get a channel off the ground. So I think that's something I just got to work on personally. And again, like I said, this whole section just ended up turning into more of a personally, more into a venting of, like, self-therapy kind of thing. But I hope you get what I'm saying. But mostly what I wanted to say is that, like, I'm really excited right now. I'm really buzzing. I'm really thinking about, like, oh man, I'm getting excited for what I'm going to create, what is going to come next, out of YouTube, out of like other additional projects, and what the people around me are potentially going to be doing soon. So, I'm really excited. But that's just about everything I wanted to talk about today. And like I said, vent a good amount. But let me know what you think in the comments below. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those there. I'm going to be wrapping things up. Again, this is a bit of a shorter one, but it is more of a personal one as well. I don't have my buddy to bounce off of, but we'll be together next time. And we'll be catching up a lot more. Actually, probably within the week you're seeing this maybe, or listening to this maybe, we'll be back with yet another. And we'll get all good and caught up. And like I said, hey, maybe we can even expand that cast and crew of people to be here on the podcast. So we'll see what grows from there. But like I said, leave a comment below if you have any questions. We'll get to those next time. I think I still have some other questions still screenshotted that we can go through. But if you have anything new that you want to ask me, that you want to build on this one, anything you want to ask Bait, he will be in the next one. And I'll keep you all posted. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, specifically all y'all members, for your support that make this happen, or at least just kind of give me the incentive to do this and keep things up, because definitely gonna get caught back up, and we're gonna have a few more other additional extra little special members videos. But anyway, this has been GatorEX. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you all later.